Imagine a funeral scene in a movie. A quiet room, a wooden box placed at the center. One person calls it a coffin, another calls it a casket. Many people assume they are just two different words for the same thing. But is that really true? If they both hold the dead, why do they look different? Why is one shaped around the human body, while the other looks like a polished rectangular display case? Could this difference carry a deeper meaning? To understand why, we have to begin with the older word, coffin. Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. The older box. What a coffin really was. The word coffin comes from the Old French coffin, meaning a basket or chest. Its first known use in English dates back to the 14th century, long before glossy showrooms became part of burial. At first, a coffin was not designed to impress anyone. It was a simple handmade wooden box built to solve a practical problem: how to carry and bury a body with the materials available. In medieval Europe, that usually meant local timber, inexpensive, rough, and easy to find. The goal was not luxury, the goal was function. That is why the traditional coffin has such a recognizable shape. It is wider at the shoulders, then narrows toward the head and feet. The box follows the body inside it. This used less wood than a rectangle, lowered cost, and made the coffin easier to carry before motorized hearses or standardized funeral equipment. So the coffin may look ceremonial today, but its shape was born from something more ordinary: material, labor, cost, and practicality. But the word casket did not begin in graveyards at all. It began somewhere much smaller and much more decorative. The decorative box. How casket entered funerals. The word casket had a very different beginning. It did not originally mean a burial box. It came from the French casse, meaning a case, and for a long time, a casket was a small decorative box used to hold jewelry, valuables, or precious objects. That origin matters. A casket suggested something protected, polished, and worth presenting carefully. So when the word entered funeral language in the 19th century, especially in the United States, it felt softer than coffin, less blunt, less tied to death, and more connected to dignity. The design changed with the word. Unlike the older tapered coffin, the casket became rectangular, smooth, polished, and easier to decorate. It often had ornamental handles, cushioned interiors, fabric linings, and high-quality woods such as mahogany, oak, or cherry. In other words, the burial box was no longer only something that carried the dead, it became something that presented the dead to the living. A word once used for boxes of valuables was now being used for a human body because the funeral itself was becoming more ceremonial and composed. And the fastest way to see that shift is not in the name, but in the shape. Shape tells the story. The clearest difference between a coffin and a casket is visible before anyone explains it. A traditional coffin usually has 6 or 8 sides. It narrows at the head, widens around the shoulders, then narrows again toward the feet. Today, that shape can look old-fashioned, dramatic, even slightly Gothic. But it was never just about style. It was a practical design shaped by the body itself. By following the human form, the coffin used less wood, took up less space, and made transportation easier. A casket, by contrast, has 4 straight sides and right-angled corners. It is a rectangle. That simple shape fit the modern funeral industry. Rectangular boxes were easier to standardize, mass-produce, and decorate. The shape also changed the inside. A casket could have cushioned lining, polished hardware, decorative metalwork, and a split lid, allowing only the upper half to open during a viewing. So the difference is not simply that one box is tapered and the other is rectangular. The coffin was shaped around the human body. The casket was shaped around the funeral ceremony. Once the shape changed, the meaning changed with it. From function to display. For most of its history, the coffin belonged to a world of limits. Wood had to be cut, shaped, and carried by hand. Money and materials mattered. Funerals were often local and practical. In that world, the burial box did not need to look impressive. It needed to do its job. That is why the older coffin feels so direct. Its shape was efficient, its materials were available, and its purpose was clear. Even today, many coffins are still primarily wood, though modern versions can include other materials. The casket grew stronger in a different setting, especially the modern American funeral system. As funeral homes, memorial services, and public viewings became common, the box became part of the final image families would remember. That changed the details. The finish, handles, lining, cushion, shine of the wood, even the way the lid opened, all became part of the funeral experience. A casket could create a feeling of dignity and comfort at a moment when people needed both. So the box did not change only because technology changed. It changed because the social ritual around death changed. That is why this difference is not the same everywhere. The same object could carry a different feeling once it entered a different culture, a different industry, and a different way of mourning. Cultural and geographic differences. In Europe, especially in the United Kingdom, the coffin never disappeared from ordinary funeral culture. Its tapered shape remained familiar, traditional, and deeply connected to older burial customs. Even today, it carries the feeling of history, something recognizable, practical, and rooted in centuries of practice. In the United States, the story moved in another direction. The rectangular casket became dominant, and that was not an accident. It fit the rise of funeral homes, memorial services, and open casket viewings. In that setting, the box was not only a container, it was part of the room, the ceremony, and the family's final memory. A rectangular casket made that easier. It looked orderly. It allowed for softer interiors, polished finishes, decorated handles, and split lids designed for viewing. It supported a funeral culture focused on presentation, comfort, and the last visible image. Other regions sit between these traditions. In Canada and Australia, both words are understood, though casket has gained ground through American influence. In parts of Africa and Asia, local customs, available materials, and modern funeral styles can blend together. The same final object became different because different societies wanted death to look different. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable part of the story: status. Why this difference matters. There is one quieter layer inside this story: cost. A casket was not only more modern, it was often more expensive. Polished hardwood, metal finishes, decorative handles, soft linings, and cushioned interiors all created a feeling of care. For many families, these details were not about showing off. They were about offering one final gesture of respect when words were no longer enough. But objects can carry more than intention. Over time, the burial box could become a quiet signal of what a family could afford, what a community expected, or what a proper farewell should look like. A simple coffin might suggest humility, tradition, and closeness to older customs. A polished casket might suggest love, dignity, and careful presentation, but it could also carry pressure to make grief look a certain way. That is what makes this object so revealing. Even in death, humans still use materials, design, and ceremony to express memory, emotion, and social meaning. So does it matter which word we use? In casual conversation, maybe not. But in culture, it matters more than it seems. The deeper meaning behind coffins and caskets. In everyday conversation, most people can say coffin or casket and still be understood. But in funeral work, family planning, or cultural history, the difference can matter. A coffin points toward an older tradition, tapered, simpler, and more directly shaped around the body. A casket points toward a modern ceremony, rectangular, polished, and designed for presentation. One word suggests historical function, the other suggests public farewell. Using the correct term can show respect for tradition and a family's wishes. It tells us what object we are imagining, what ritual surrounds it, and what culture produced it. The shift from coffin to casket reflects a larger change in society. Burial moved from something mostly practical and local toward something more organized, commercial, and publicly memorialized. A small word can hold the history of an industry, a custom, and an attitude toward death. In the end, the difference is not just between two boxes, it is between two ways of saying goodbye. Two boxes, two ways of remembering. By now, the difference is no longer just vocabulary. A coffin is older, tapered and practical. It is narrow at the head and feet, wider at the shoulders, and shaped around the body. Its design came from a world where wood, labor, cost, and transportation all mattered. It was simple because it had to be simple. A casket is different. It is rectangular, polished, modern, and shaped around ceremony. It grew in a world of funeral homes, public viewings, industrial production, soft interiors, decorative handles, and carefully arranged final goodbyes. Both objects serve the same purpose. They help the living carry, bury, and honor the dead. But they tell different stories about the societies that made them. The coffin speaks of tradition, economy, and a more direct relationship with burial. The casket speaks of ritual, presentation, comfort, and memory. One feels closer to the body. The other feels closer to the room where people gather to say goodbye. And that is what makes this simple object so powerful. A burial box may seem ordinary, but its shape can reveal how people think about death, respect, grief, and remembrance. Because sometimes, even the shape of a final box can reveal how deeply humans care about memory, dignity, and the last goodbye. If this simple difference changed the way you see coffins and caskets, there are many more hidden stories waiting inside everyday objects. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Secrets of Simple Things for more quiet histories behind the things we think we already understand.